everybody, if you're watching this, please be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel. I'm back for some more Black history in under 10 minutes. All right, the subject today is COINTELPRO. All right, so in 1967 there was I don't like to call it a riot, more of a rebellion against the situations in Detroit. The conditions by African Americans. So at this point, President Lyndon B. Johnson wanted to figure out, why were these riots happening so often in urban Black areas consistently across the country? At this point, Watts has happened. We had Detroit. You had issues in, Birmingham in 1963 when they killed those 4 girls. They try to make y'all think Black people did not fight back. No, that city was another one that was burning. All right, anyway. So he turned to none other than Satan himself, the then FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover, who had dedicated his life to finding, he had a pathological hatred toward Black people in particular, okay? And there are people who worked in the FBI that said that about him. Anyway, President Johnson was certain that outside forces were orchestrating these crises, okay? And the problem with that is he couldn't actually believe that Black people might actually be angry. That there must be some colluding of, those loud African Americans, those loud Negroes in the Black Panther Party and the SCLC and the NAACP. That has to be what's behind it. So President Johnson, anyway, pressed people in the FBI to uncover evidence of a national conspiracy. Hoover admitted with startling candor, I have to say, that there was no organized element behind, these riots. I can't find anything. Not the most welcome conclusion, okay, since it was the opposite of what President Johnson wanted to hear. All right. So 1 month after this meeting, Hoover will receive approval for the expansion of the FBI's counterintelligence program, also known as COINTELPRO. All right. To coordinate investigations of, quote, and this is a quote, Black nationalist hate type organizations. All right. Now, this was originally an organization. Originally, this was deployed during the 1950s against communists. Okay, so it had already had a test run, including Martin Luther King Jr. and his suspected affiliation with subversives, other communists, and other people. Martin Luther King identified as a democratic socialist. He did. And he criticized the capitalist system. But whoever he decides to associate with in their political associations was his business. Okay, it wasn't against the law. Anyway, COINTELPRO was now charged with a broader scope, focused almost exclusively on Black power militants, okay, in the wake of government intelligence on racial rioting. So J. Edgar Hoover, director of FBI's relationship with develops a relationship with Attorney General Ramsey Clark at the time. They had an acrimonious relationship, okay? Clark had a sensitivity, despite his problems. Attorney General Clark had a sensitivity to potential abuses of power in the areas of surveillance. And Hoover, whose first days of public service had predated the Great Depression, and this is in the 1960s, was not going to be stopped by Attorney General. You see what happens when somebody's out of control? Even if recent Supreme Court decisions affirming and expanding defendant rights made his job much harder, he didn't care. Hoover. So the director publicly stated his belief that civil disobedience and legal loopholes had contributed to the decline of law and order. Ironically, it was now Clark, after I guess just slight cajoling in whiteness, what I like to call a cult of whiteness. They cannot go against each other when it comes to whiteness. All right? It was now Clark who would help restore some of this lost order. All right. Now, anyway, in September of 1967, Clark ordered the FBI chief to investigate whether the riots had, in fact, been planned. Okay, now I told you they already got their answer. They keep creating the situation. Sound familiar? It should. All right? To investigate whether these riots were planned, a request that would prove to be the seed of the Bureau's ghetto informant program, which, with the aid of 4,000 nationwide associates, reported on the pulse of the Black community to the FBI and the White House. So, for example, if you had been caught doing a crime and you were either in jail or about to go to jail, they would tell you could get your time off if you did this, that, and the other. So by the winter of 1968, COINTELPRO's primary mandate was to prevent the rise of an African American leader who could successfully knit together a national coalition, what the Bureau referred to as a Black Messiah. This is their actual language in the documents. That's their goal. So what they would get was black people who had committed crimes, or some voluntarily, for the ghetto informant program. That means because they know if a white person shows up, anybody non-black shows up, they're going to be a little suspicious. So they got black people to penetrate these organizations and take this information back so they could destroy black people's political progress. That happened. Okay? So COINTELPRO would eventually include 360 operations designed to disrupt and eventually destroy black nationalist organizing, and ultimately would represent a watershed event in American history, as it curtailed the FBI's long practice policy of requiring a connection between domestic dissidents, people who go against something domestically, and foreign agents to justify Bureau activity. This was meant to really figure out if people in this country were connected with other people. Instead, this becomes an inside job against their very citizens. Okay? Now, its secret war against black power activists would be marked by unprecedented abuses of federal power that featured the systemic, illegal harassment, imprisonment, and at times death of black militants. Okay? So, there were a couple of people that made the top of this list. Stokely Carmichael, also known as Kwame Ture, who I talked about in part 1, whom the Bureau singled out as one of the potential black messiahs. Elijah Muhammad, who was over the Nation of Islam. H. Rat Brown. Why is it balloons? I did not do that. H. Rat Brown, who was a member of the Black Panther Party. And, of course, none other at the top of that list was Martin Luther King Jr. So all of y'all who think he is reduced to the I Have a Dream speech, it's going to be a no, it's going to be a never for me. All right? Anyway, do your reading. All right, so Rat Brown fit the description, all of these, of a national urban guerrilla leader. I don't mean like an animal. Guerrilla warfare means when people don't put it down like on big papers and maps what the war plan is. And they do that so you can't trace them. Anyway, so H. Rat Brown eventually is the one that lives the longest. Martin Luther King is murdered. Stokely Carmichael goes into exile in Africa. He comes back later. Elijah Muhammad eventually dies, but Malcolm X left the Nation of Islam. And I know they make it all seem kind of just about him becoming more famous than everybody else. And don't get me wrong, that jealousy was part of it. But when he called them out, called Elijah Muhammad out for impregnating young teenage girls and not marrying them, and that's not part of the Islamic law, and then shaming them and sending them to other places, the FBI helped carry out what was already part of their plan. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. H. Rat Brown was the Minister of Justice in the Black Panthers National Party. Okay, eventually he'll go to jail and change his name to Abdullah Al-Amin, and he's an imam now. That's a minister. He was a major spokesperson for the movement as it changed its focus from civil rights to human rights to black power. Brown was hounded by the police, as the Black Panther happened to a lot of them, and wound up serving prison time at the Attica prison in New York. All right, he was eventually paroled in 1976 and moved his life from New York to Atlanta. And the West ended that, and if you know, you know, okay? He worked with the community to rid it of crime, of drugs, while building a religious community of faith, good works, and collective prayer. All right? He had many national and international visitors, okay? After 24 years of living in Atlanta peacefully, coaching teams for kids who needed sports and that kind of stuff, he was arrested on March 20th, 2000, and charged with the death of Fulton County, Georgia's sheriff's deputy at that time, Ricky Kinchin, a black man. They had called over, there was a shooting that happened in the parking lot of the grocery store he owned. Okay? However, with all the evidence, all the indications, a man named Otis Jackson killed this man, killed the deputy sheriff, admitted to it, confessed this, and they still convicted H. Rat Brown or Imam El-Amin. So my thing is, Otis Jackson is now in a Florida jail for unrelated charges, continues to maintain that he was the person who still killed him. He's like, that man is not guilty. Now, typically confessions like that would get you off, or they're supposed to, right? Anyway, so on June 29, 2000, parolee Otis Jackson, I confessed to crime in sworn affidavits. But A-Trap Brown, Imam El-Amin, he is still serving a prison sentence in Tucson, Arizona. Now, he had moved his life after serving a shorter prison sentence as a Black Panther. And now he is still in prison, old, debilitated a bit, but he's still living. And let me tell you about the power that, don't think that wasn't set up. Don't think in the midst of that George Bush era, that shit was not set up. And they wanted to make him pay for not being the Black militant that they had painted him out to be. They still got him. His daughter is his lawyer. His daughter has talked about how it's taking a toll on her mental health. So if you can write a letter, if you can do anything, be mindful of that. They've even asked, hell, please just bring him back to a prison in Atlanta where his family can be close to him. That's what we're dealing with. All right, here's Black History in under 10 minutes or 11 minutes, but y'all be all right. Talk to y'all soon. Bye.